Hello, I'm Johannes. You can find me online with the handle at Dingstags, but sometimes also at Yodax, which was my alter handle. Never mind. So today, or for this talk, I wanted to find an answer if some logical programming concepts can be applied to Ruby too. So our beloved Ruby is known to be a very flexible language. It supports multiple programming paradigms, more or less. It's object-oriented. It can be functional. That's debatable for some people. It's for sure imperative, procedural. But what about logic programming? For this, let's go back to define what logic programming is. It's a programming paradigm that's based on formal logic. Some people, mostly who went to university, had to suffer or live through this at one point during their studies. All logic programming languages have common characteristics. They're decorative, so you describe what you want instead of how to do it. Think of like SQL is somewhat declarative, but can also be used imperatively, depending on the implementation. And it uses logical relations to express problems and always employs some kind of algorithm to find solutions. So we all know the saying -1, Matz is nice, so we are nice. If you want to transform that into a logical program, it would look something like this. So Matz is nice, Matz uses Ruby, everybody who uses Ruby is also nice. We use Ruby, so therefore we are nice. There you have it. You have a logical, you have the -1 syllogism paraphrase. Quick, some key logic programming languages that are out there. Prolog, which is the oldest one and also most important one. It has a very rich history. I think there's a whole talk to be made why Prolog has not lived up to its potential. And it was basically before AI was all neural networks and LLMs and stuff. It was the language for AI during 80s and 70s, used for language processing, rule-based reasoning. Datalog is for database querying. You can think of Datalog being the Betamax to VHS. Basically, it's the same analogy. It's better, but didn't succeed in my answer set programming, and Miniconv are also two other logic programming languages. Let's take a look at an example. I guess most of us have come across some kind of authorization system. They had to program for work in Ruby, which looks like this. You have a bunch of data, you have roles, permissions, and then you have methods to query this data. So if we want to answer the question, can Susie edit? We need to call the canAccess method. And if we want all users who can edit, we have to call the users who can then as a parameter the permission, and to get all users who can edit in this system. This is a classic imperative way of solving these problems. Now, if we would look at the Prolog implementation, it's not that much shorter, but it's more dense. And you can see all the building blocks of a typical Prolog program. So you have your facts, you have your rules, and then you have a bunch of queries. You basically define the world, what it is, and then you ask queries about the world you define. So the core concepts are predicates that are named relationships, like in this case, role, permission, and canAccess. In comparison to the Ruby implementation before, you just write it like this. You don't have to define. This is not a method like the predicate. You just define the world as it is. But there are also built-in predicates, but I won't go just quickly glance over them. I won't go into detail. So basically, the three most important things are facts that are simple assertions about the world that are always true, rules that describe relationships between these facts, and queries to ask questions about the knowledge base that's defined by the facts and rules. And the answers to these queries, Prolog finds through unification. You can think of unification. This is a very simple, magical Ruby unification method. Like when you look at P1 and P2, a unification algorithm would find as a result that X is Bob and Y is John. So it's like kind of a two-way pattern matching, but that's as a simplified way to look at it. Forget about backtracking. So, I mean, it's also important because you explore all possible choices. So if a path doesn't work, it goes back to the last one and then finds all solutions. Why am I telling you this? Nowadays, Prolog is mostly used as embedded language in other languages, and it's used for facilitate building programs that help with certain kind of problems, like constraint satisfaction problems, search algorithms, formal verification. That relates to the first talk we had. Like, there are programs out there that go over the AST of programming language to formally verify code. It's mostly used for knowledge representation, for storing and then reasoning over complex domains, and for rule-based systems, decision support, fraud detection, adaptive learning, and such. So the benefits of embedding a kind of logic programming paradigm or a logic programming language in another language is that the declarative style to describe what and not the how is easier to grasp. You get bidirectional queries, like if you go back to, wrong direction. In the Ruby example, we had can access method and the users who can. In the Prolog example, we just use can access and then either ask if a certain person can edit, or if we want all users, we can just use the user variable, and unification magically gives us all the answers. It's easier to represent complex rules, like if somebody had to if you think of the authorization example, that was a very simplified example, but like authorization systems and permission systems they can be very expansive and vast. If you have like a very dense and clear, concise representation of these rules, that's much easier to grasp. The downsides of embedding a logic programming language in another language is there for sure is a performance overhead. There's an integration complexity, maintenance, debuggers challenges, also a learning overhead. Now, I took a look at the Ruby ecosystem and wanted to see if, like, Ruby is not the first language that comes to mind when you implement an embedded Prolog or embedded logic programming languages. But it turns out there's a short but interesting history. So basically every gem that's out there, they all are maintained right now and they're not really used, but they can all be traced back to a program that was found in 2006 on some Japanese website that was called Tiny Prologs. Then some early Rubies like James Park and Eigenclass discussed this, found these from Japanese websites, discussed like how this could be expanded into a Ruby-like view. And from these blog posts, all the other gem maintainers took it away and created their own Prolog-like DSL gems in Ruby. So the original syntax was very verbose predicate notation, and then if you go down to the RB Prolog gem DSL, this feels like a proper Ruby, so to say. Quickly, there are not many gems. Like I've already said, all of them are unmaintained. These are the 5 main ones. There are a couple of very initial implementations, but these 5 ones are really usable. The first one is the most advanced, I would say. The second one is interesting because I've never heard of callcc before. Who has heard of callcc? Okay, look it up. look it up. It's like it's interesting. I think it's interesting that I think it's still there in Ruby, so they haven't deprecated it. They wanted to deprecate it for I don't know years, but it's still there. And it uses a modular approach, and its unification algorithm was extracted into a gem. And also, there's another gem for non-deterministic programming called Emberbit. And the author, I just wanted to mention it, it's unrelated, is crazy because he also created a gem that adds a go-to statement to Ruby, which I think is bonkers. And basically, all of them share the same characteristics. They all look something like this. The DSLs have a way to define the predicates. the predicate for gives me weird active support vibes, what it does, like to define the likes method on the string. But they all focus on like providing a nice syntax, which they rely heavily on method missing, and they're all not very performant in that way, but they are nice. I think all of them were a nice learning opportunity to explore logic programming in Ruby for the authors, but none of them found some widespread approach or some application in a bigger application. At least I contacted some authors, and all of them said they didn't pursue or didn't advertise their gems. I also tried my own way of like this. Sorry, no live coding. I tried to create a Prolog interpreter in Ruby called Klaus. I wanted to show you with some live coding, but I will shoot it up on GitHub later. Yes, if you want to be serious about using Prolog in Ruby, there's just one gem that's called UPL that uses SVI Prolog. That's a dev-free open source Prolog version out there. You can use it directly from Ruby. You can pass data back and forth, query facts and rules in Ruby or in Prolog. And so it basically, the whole engine, the reasoning engine is like Prolog, but you can create your facts and your rules and your knowledge base in Ruby or the other way around. So that works pretty well. The conclusion, Ruby is flexible enough to support logic programming language, support logic programming through DSLs. There are a lot of applications. The declarative logic allow a clearer and concise problem expressions, which naturally fits, I think, nicely with Ruby's readability and expression approach. But it has some performance and complexity trade-offs for sure. Interestingly, historically, I think LLM-based AI or neural network-based AI sucks all the out of all the other approaches that were before there, unfortunately. But I found some papers that tried to combine both approaches. So where Prolog is used as a language to talk to LLMs or as an output for LLMs, which has the benefit that it's easily verifiable. So especially for mathematical or for all kinds of calculations, like if you tell your ChatGPT to output some Prolog, you have a way to verify more easily. So it's not like it can be seen as a way to prevent a little bit of hallucination. And lastly, I think Ruby is like the same all the other gem offers before, and like my own sorry effort at the Prolog Ruby interpreter, it's still perfect as an educational language. So it was very fun to try out to create the engine, to find out the inner workings of a unification algorithm, which started with one sentence I told ChatGPT, and then it failed miserably. And then I had to go back and really understand what's going on. And I also used it to write the tests for that engine, which was awesome. Like you could having the code and then going back to ChatGPT, like we saw in the first talk, to just generate out the tests or start with them was awesome. All right, that's it. If you are interested, I have some appendices where some entry points for Prolog, then some. The first one like really struck me. So I didn't know Joe Armstrong used Prolog to create Erlang. So the first Erlang version was basically a modified Prolog, which was weird and awesome at the same time. Yes, there you go. It's yes. Thank you. Questions?
All right, thank you, Johannes. Do we have any couple questions for Johannes?
Sorry.
Yeah. How did you arrive at the topic? Why were like, hey, I feel like I should learn some Prolog and build a unification engine. How do you get to that point?
I don't know, to be sure. So it started with some just browsing around, and then I learned about this what is it called, fifth generation computer system something. So in the 80s, like Japan had way too much money, and then they invested heavily in creating like a new kind of computer that is computer system that is based on logic programming and heavy parallelism, and it failed miserably. And that's where I got my hook into Prolog and why it failed and why it never lived up to its potential, and how there was a political fight between the Lisp world, which is basically US, and Prolog world, which was more like Europe. And then I got stuck with that it was like at the end it's just used now as an embeddable language, and then I was like, okay, let's take a look if there's some Ruby application, if there's some Prolog embeddable in Ruby. There wasn't, so that's how I
Sick.
yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Johannes? Cool. Then thank you again to Johannes.